If you're somebody who struggles time after time with hitting your daily protein intake, today I'm going to show you the exact steps for you to hit your protein target without question. And I also want to give you 10 forgotten protein sources that you need to add into your diet to help you hit those daily targets without getting bored of the same old foods. Now, before we get into the video, make sure to drop me a like and a subscribe below. Now, let's get into it. There is zero reason why you should not be hitting your daily protein intake. It is the most simple thing to do when you really start to break down the foundations of it, and then the other things that you can do to help you hit your protein intake. There should be no excuse to not hit your protein intake other than when it's just one of those days where you literally have no protein sources around you. Maybe you're traveling. Or you're in some other situation where that happens. But on a day-to-day basis, a normal routine basis, you should be able to hit your protein intake with no questions asked. And if you're not doing that, it's because you're not following the things that I'm about to break down to you in this video and in this podcast here. So I hope you get a ton of value out of this. We're also going to dive into 10 forgotten protein sources that you should add into your diet. These are things that you can add in to spice up your diet. I know that people say, man, I get tired of eating chicken, broccoli, turkey, like the same foods over and over again. I'm going to give you some surprisingly high protein source foods that you should add into your diet. And these are going to allow you to enjoy your diet a bit more, which is something that is critical for us when it comes down to it. And I will say, for me, I don't struggle to hit my protein intake because I love protein. I love meat, so it's easy for me to eat. So when it comes down to it, there's some people that struggle to hit their protein intake because they simply don't like protein sources. Or maybe you're a vegetarian or a vegan and you don't eat meat. It's going to be harder for you. It's just it is what it is. It's going to be harder for the person that doesn't like eating protein or the person who doesn't eat meat. It's simply going to be. But there's ways and strategies for you to guarantee that you can hit your protein intake, and it still has to be a focus. You can't say, just because I don't like meat or just because I don't eat dairy or just because I don't eat meat, that doesn't mean that you have an out or an excuse for why you should not hit your protein intake. You should still hit your protein intake without question. And I'm going to give you some tips surrounding that as well. But as we get into this, we're going to talk about two primary things when it comes to hitting our daily protein intake. And the first thing is going to be our foundations. These are two things that we have to do. And really what it is, we have to have this planned and strategized beforehand in order to hit our protein intake. And then I'm going to give you some side tips on how you can build on these foundations to be able to guarantee that you hit your protein intake without question. So without further ado, let's get into the details of this episode. So with that being said, let's talk about the foundations. The foundations of our diet when it comes to daily protein intake are really simple, but they're oftentimes missed or looked over, or people just don't necessarily take the time to think about these simple things. So the first foundation is we want to evenly space out meals throughout the day. Now, when I say we want to evenly space out meals throughout the day, I understand that some people fast. I understand that some people use time-restricted eating, and that's fine. But what I will tell you is that if you are somebody who struggles to hit your daily protein intake, you are probably not the person who needs to be fasting. You're probably not the person who needs to be doing a time-restricted eating, because if you're waiting till 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock to eat your first meal, the chances of you getting in your protein intake on a daily basis are few and far between. Because when you boil it down, the less meals we have throughout the day, the larger our protein quantities have to be. And we have to understand that when we have less meals, we have to eat a lot more protein per serving, and that's going to be hard for the majority of people. Now, some people, like myself, I can have no meals all day, and then I can knock out 180 grams of protein in about 2 hours, because I can eat a 100-gram protein meal, and then I can have 80 grams in like a smoothie or something, right? That's not the case for most people. And the reality is, you're more than likely not going to be able to fast for long periods and still hit your protein. You're more than likely not even going to be able to fast breakfast and hit your protein. And I don't want to say that fasting is a bad thing, because there's a ton of benefits to it. But I think the benefits of fasting, personally, do not outweigh the benefits of hitting your protein intake. You are going to be better off by hitting your protein intake rather than focusing on the fasting. So with that being said, we need to evenly space our meals out throughout the day. We have to do that, and we have to pick how many meals we want to have throughout the day. And that is going to lead us into the second foundational step, which is we have to plan out our portion sizes and our protein quantities for each of the meals based on how we plan those meals throughout the day. So let me give you an example of what I mean. When it comes down to it, let's say the general person eats a breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That would be what most people would do, right? They eat 3 meals in a day. So if we're having 3 meals in a day and we're looking at the course of our day, maybe we have 1 or 2 snacks within there. So let's say we're having 5 eating times throughout the day. We need to have a plan for how we're going to hit our daily protein intake based off those 5 eating times. Now, you could have 4 meals. You could have breakfast, lunch, and then you could have a meal before dinner and then another meal. Some people like smaller meals spaced out throughout the day. Other people like larger meals more or less frequently throughout the day, and that's fine. Either one is okay, and you need to pick what works best for you, your work schedule, your routine, your needs in terms of hitting your protein intake. But what I will say is you have to set this standard to start everything off. If you don't know how many meals I'm having and how many snacks I'm having, then you are going to fail. And this means that you need to have a plan for the day. You can't go into the day and say this to yourself, I'm just going to eat whenever I get hungry, or I'm just going to eat whenever, because that's a recipe for disaster. And I tell my clients this all the time, and a common question is, what if I'm not hungry? Well, frankly, if you're not hungry, we still need to get in our protein, because the chances are if you're pushing off your hunger, you're going to get to a point where you're probably not going to be able to hit your protein intake by the end of the day, and it's just going to throw your day off. So what I recommend is you have your times throughout the day where you eat, and you eat despite how hungry you are. That doesn't mean you have to force feed yourself, but that does mean that you need to intentionally try to get in a really strategic and spaced out timing between your meals and between your snacks and things. So you have to pick what you want to do. So like I said, you can have 3 meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner. You can have 4 meals. You can have 3 meals and 2 snacks. You can have 3 meals, 1 snack. You can have no snacks, but you need to decide what that is for you. So with that being said, I'm going to give you an example of what my day looks like. And I'm going to show you how I portion out my protein sources and how I just space out these protein quantities based off of my day of eating. So I'm the person that does 3 meals throughout the day, and I love to have bigger meals. I like to have bigger meals because I like to sit down and I like to enjoy my meals when I am eating, and when I'm not eating, I just work and I do things outside of that, right? So I like to have bigger meals, so I have 3 meals. Now, I have breakfast, lunch, dinner. I oftentimes have a snack between lunch and dinner that ranges between 200 to 300 calories. It's not a big meal, and that's normally not a protein source for me. So I don't waste my protein or I don't spend my protein total in that snack. So I have 3 meals to hit my daily protein intake of 200 grams. So when we break that down, it doesn't have to be rocket science, right? So we have 200 grams, and personally, I actually get anywhere from 200 to 220 grams. So let's just shoot in the middle there and say 210. I have 3 meals there, so I need to get 70 grams of protein at each meal. Now, I might have some protein in my snack. I might have another snack throughout the day if I get hungry and I want to have an extra thing, and I might have some protein in it. So maybe it ends up being a little bit less than 70, but 70 plus 70 plus 70 is 210, right? It gives me a number to hit at each meal, and that is easy to track. That's easy to guarantee that when I get to the end of the day, I know if I did what I planned out to do, I will hit my protein intake. So I spaced out those meals evenly throughout the day. I decided how many protein servings I'm going to have, and I decided what the protein quantity was going to be for each of those meals. Now, for you, if you hear that and you say, Jonathan, that's insane. You're going to have 70 grams of protein per meal. I would say, actually, that's not too hard for me. I love protein. Like I said, I can eat 10 to 16 ounces of meat in a sitting, or add Greek yogurt to it, or do a Greek yogurt bowl and add protein powder, and that's pretty easy for me. But for you, that may be something really hard, right? So you need to space your meals out throughout the day more frequently, or you need to have snacks that have protein within them. So we really have to think about this, and we need to strategize. But that right there is the foundation of hitting your protein intake. If you don't do that, you are going to fail time and time and time again. And if you're listening to this and you have failed time and time again, it's because you're not planning. You're not spacing out your meals, and you're not planning what you have to have at each meal in order to hit your protein quantity for that meal. So those are the foundations. It's not rocket science, but it does guarantee that you are going to hit your protein intake. Now, side tips beyond that. So we have our foundations, but then we do have things we can do to help us hit our protein intake. And these are also important. We don't want to minimize these. So with that being said, here are our side tips. I personally love this tip here, and that is stack protein sources within your meals. So let me explain what that means. Stacking protein sources, for example, would be this. If I'm having a taco bowl and I, within that bowl, put a few different ingredients. I have, let's just say, a base of lettuce, and then my main protein source is chicken. So I have my main protein source, I weigh out, or I put however many ounces of chicken I need into my bowl. Let's say it's 6 ounces. And then on top of that, I add in some black beans. Black beans aren't a direct protein source. They're actually a carb source. But within those black beans, we're going to get some protein. So we get protein from the black beans. Maybe we get 8 to 15 grams of protein from it, and we stack that on top of our main protein source, and we're gonna add a substantial amount of protein throughout each meal. So let's say we stack protein sources at each meal throughout the day. Maybe the stack that we put on our main protein source for each meal is only 5 extra grams per meal, but you add that up over the day, that's 15 grams of protein, right? So another example is, say we're having a Mediterranean bowl and we have turkey within that bowl. Now, on top of the turkey, we add some roasted chickpeas. Within the chickpeas, we're going to have some protein within the sources of nutrients in the chickpeas alongside the carbs and the fats that are in there as well. But you're going to get a small portion of protein. So you're going to be able to stack up small portions of, or small quantities of protein as you go along throughout the day. So that is my first tip for you when it comes down to hitting your protein intake. If you do this, it will help you hit your daily protein intake. So stack your protein sources within your meals. Now, let's get into the second side tip when it comes down to hitting our daily protein intake. And this one is something that I would recommend you do only on occasion. If you're having to hit this tip too often, that means you're not planning well enough, but this can be something that you revert to if necessary, and that is use protein shakes to guarantee that you hit your daily protein intake by the end of the day. So let's say that you get to the end of the day, maybe something came up at work, something with your kids, something in life, and you had to miss a meal, or you weren't able to get in the meal that you thought you were going to be able to get. And you have 50 grams of protein that you need to get in, and you already had your dinner. Well, then you can throw 2 scoops of protein into a shaker bottle. You can mix it up. You can drink that. It's going to be the easiest way for you to guarantee that you finish a day hitting your target, and that's going to be 100% fine. So you can either have a plant-based protein, you can have a whey or dairy-based protein. Either one is fine. But what I want to get across to you is that this is a completely safe and fine way to get in your protein. Although I don't recommend that you do this every single day, you can easily or safely add in protein shakes into your day to help you hit that daily protein intake. Because when we really break it down, when we look at protein powders, all they are extracted versions of protein or isolated versions of protein. There's nothing groundbreaking or there's nothing special about the supplement of protein powder. So for example, a whey protein is just the isolate of whey pulled out from a dairy source and put into a powder. That's all it is. It's nothing crazy. Although it is a little bit more processed, it goes through some processing to make that happen. There's nothing wrong with that. So using protein shakes and protein powders to help you guarantee that you hit your protein intake by the end of the day is a safe and a reasonable thing for you to do. And it's okay for you to have 1 to 2 protein scoops or protein shakes per day. I don't think that's a bad thing for you to do. Now, like I said, with that being said, some people would argue that you need to have whole single ingredient foods. That should be something that you have over or in place of protein shakes. I think that I would agree. If you can get your protein in from meats, from dairies, from plant-based sources without adding in protein shakes, that's probably going to be better. But having protein shakes is not a bad thing. I want to stress that to you. So if you're having a hard time at the end of the day, or maybe you had something come up like I mentioned and you need to hit that protein intake, throw in some protein shakes or throw in a few scoops, and I guarantee you're going to be fine, and it's going to help you hit that protein intake on a daily basis. Now, we're going to go to the last tip here, which is going to be use protein snacks if necessary. So protein bars, protein chips, different protein things that are made nowadays. Once again, really similar to protein shakes. They're 100% fine and safe, and they're not bad for you despite what some people may claim. Just watch out for how well you digest them. So if you get a bar that has a lot of fiber in it, it may cause digestive issues. If you get a snack that has some different types of preservatives and things in it, it may cause some gut irritation. For some people, for others, it won't. But digestion is important, so pay attention to how well you're digesting these things. And that really goes for any type of food that you have. You need to pay attention to that digestion because it is important, right? So those are 3 tips on top of the foundation. So before we move into the 10 forgotten protein sources and finish off this episode, I want you to really sit with these foundations and with these tips and understand that if you don't plan well, if you don't prepare well, if you don't know how many meals you're going to have, if you don't know how much protein you need at each meal and each snack, you are going to fail time and time again. And if you have failed time and time again, it's simply because you're not doing that. And I want to encourage you to do that. You have no excuses. I promise you, if you do these things, if you follow the foundations, if you use these side tips, you have no reason not to hit your protein intake. Now, let's move into the second half of this video and episode here and talk about the 10 forgotten protein sources. So these 10 things, some of these may be forgotten for some of y'all. Some of you may be eating these on a daily basis, but these are the most common things that I've noticed people forget they can have in their diet that have a ton of protein. And these things you can throw in very easily into your diet. All these things that I'm mentioning are not hard things to add into your diet. And these can also be ways for you to use that tip that I mentioned of protein snacking or stacking rather. You can use these 10 forgotten protein sources to add those on to other protein sources that you're already having. So let's talk about those. So number 1 item that is often forgotten is shrimp. For 4 ounces of shrimp, there is 27 grams of protein. This is an amazing source of protein. Me and my wife have been on a shrimp kick lately. We get frozen shrimp, actually. It's a great deal. You can get it really cheap. You throw it in a skillet, you throw it on the grill. You can easily cook it. It tastes amazing. It's really high protein. It's lean protein. There's not a lot of fat in it, and it's great for you. So shrimp is my number 1 thing that I wanted to remind you of because this is such a good source of protein. So shrimp is the first thing. Now, the second thing is pork tenderloin. Some people like pork, some people don't. What I will tell you is pork tenderloin, you can find very easy or accessible ways to make it in ways that are already seasoned where you can just throw it into an air fryer or into an oven and cook it very easily. And I love it for that. I buy my pork tenderloin at Aldi. They have it in a pork tenderloin strip, and you just throw that in the air fryer or in the oven. Super easy to cook, like I mentioned. And in 4 ounces of pork tenderloin, there are 29 grams of protein. So this is a great source of protein, guys. And if you like pork, add this into your diet. Throw this on some rice. Throw this into a salad. Chop it up and put it in a little bowl or something, right? There are a ton of ways you can add this in. Now, the next one is actually something me and my wife have been on a kick with as well lately, and that is tilapia or halibut. And these 2 fish are really lean. They are white fish. They are easy to make. They cook really quickly. They're cheap. And for 4 ounces of tilapia, there are 30 grams of protein. So you're getting a ton of protein in a small portion of tilapia or halibut, and you can make this in tons of ways. And the way that I recommend you make it is put it in a fish taco, season it with some taco seasoning, put it in a corn tortilla wrap, put some coleslaw mix on there, put a little guacamole, and then boom, you have an easy meal that takes you probably 10 minutes to make. You probably only have to touch it for 4 minutes, and it tastes amazing. Now, the next thing we're gonna talk about is Canadian bacon, and I'm also gonna throw in turkey bacon on the side here, but the primary thing is Canadian bacon. You may have not heard of that before, but this source of protein you can use for breakfast sandwiches. You can chop it up, add it into your eggs, and it's a great source of protein. For 4 ounces of Canadian bacon, you get 24 grams of protein. So it's a really good source of protein. Now, the next one, this is gonna be a shocker, and the next 2 actually might be extremely shocking to you to know that these have a lot of protein, but the first one is scallops. And if you're like me, you probably are like, scallops? Are you for real? That looks like a fatty thing, or like kind of like cartilage, or it kind of looks fatty just in general, right? So when you look at scallops, you don't think protein, but for 4 ounces of scallops, you have 23 grams of protein. So you can easily throw this into a pot and cook it with like some coconut milk. You can throw it into a dish and cook it up with a little bit of butter or some olive oil, season that with salt and pepper. It's gonna taste great. Eat it with some rice, eat it with some veggies, right? That's a great source of protein that a lot of people don't know about. Now, the next one is clams and oysters. Now, if you're like me, you think oysters are disgusting. So we're not even gonna talk a ton about oysters, but you can add oysters into your diet if you like those. Throw those on the grill or something, bake them. But clams have 29 grams of protein for 4 ounces. I know in the South as well, this is a little less reasonable to have and not as fresh, obviously. But if you're living on the coast somewhere, you're in California, you're in Florida, you're in, South Carolina, wherever it is, right? Clams, oysters, any type of shellfish like that can actually be really high in protein, and they're very lean as well. So 4 ounces of clams, 29 grams of protein, guys. That's pretty insane. Now, the next source, or the next 3 sources that we're gonna talk about are plant-based sources. And these are actually sources that I would recommend you use as protein stacks. So you stack these on top of a dish with chicken, a dish with steak, a dish with turkey, or something like that. And these are things that some people know about, other people forget about. The first one we're gonna go over here, tofu, is really common within the vegan and vegetarian world, but tofu has 20 grams of protein per cup and 180 calories. So it's relatively high in protein. You can add this into your diet really easy by just cooking it on a pan, throwing it into a salad with some chicken. Use that as a different texture, as a different taste within the meal. It can be pretty great. So alongside that, something you can also use in salads is edamame. And edamame has 190 calories per cup and 17 grams of protein. So this isn't necessarily an extremely high source of protein, but this is a great one to add in as a protein stack. So that stacking of protein can be great if you add this into, like I said, a salad or some other type of dish that you find on the internet with another high protein source. You can add in 10, 15, even 20 grams of protein if you use a larger portion of those in your diet. Now, the last one here is lentils, and these contain 9 grams of fiber, first off, and then 12 grams of protein for every 140 calories. So yet again, another great one to stack in your diet. I like lentils, edamame in my salads. It's a great way to eat them. I will also say, I forgot to mention, edamame is great if you just salt it and you eat it as is. You can steam it and salt it. You've probably had it at like a Chinese restaurant or some other type of restaurant similar to that. Really great source of protein if you stack that in, right? Now, the last thing I want to talk about here is protein coming from the source of lunch meat. And lunch meat is one that is oftentimes overlooked. And I've mentioned this a ton on my Instagram, but when it comes down to it, turkey, lunch meat, and even ham can be a great source of protein. Really easy, cheap, easy to bring to work, easy to bring on trips, easy to bring on the road. All kinds of benefits to this. But for 4 ounces of turkey lunch meat, there are 18 to 20 grams of protein. So you add in, some protein chips on the side, or maybe you have a protein bar with your sandwich when you're in a rush or something. It can be a great source of protein, and it's super easy and convenient. So there are 10 forgotten protein sources that you can easily add into your diet, and things that you should definitely try to add in to spice up your diet, keep some variety in your diet, and also get the nutrients from these foods, because these are all very nutrient dense foods. Now, the last thing I want to go over here are just the common foods or common sources of protein that you can add into your diet that I think some people just need a reminder about. So my favorite ones are the ones I'm going to list off to you. So that's chicken, lean turkey meat, strip steak, lean ground beef or steak. Deer meat is amazing. Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, Those are all my favorite sources of protein. You can easily add those into your diet. And like I said, stack these. Use different types of protein in different types of meals. Do a little surf and turf. Do a little salad with some chicken and some edamame. Do a little salad with some chicken and chickpeas. There's a ton of ways you can approach this. But like I said, there is zero reason why you should not hit your protein intake on a daily basis. And if you follow these tips, I guarantee that you will hit your protein intake. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to drop a like and subscribe below. Let me know in the comments as well any questions, thoughts, concerns that you have. Even if it's bad, I want to hear what it is. I love a little feedback, but make sure not to be mean because we're all about spreading love out here. So with that being said, make sure to wake up grateful, count your blessings, spread some love. I'll see you next time.